The stars were silent. For ages, the galaxy had floated in its endless rhythm of light and darkness. Planets spun, suns burned, and civilizations rose and fell without notice. But then, the silence broke. A sound cut through the void of space. It was not a song, not a voice, but a cry. A cry filled with fear, pain, and desperation. Across the stars, the signal spread, bouncing from system to system, reaching ears that chose not to listen. It carried only one message: help us. We are dying. The cry came from a distant world, far beyond the borders of Earth. It was faint, broken, full of static. Yet the emotion inside it was clear. The call was from a people facing extinction. They begged for aid. They begged for someone to hear them. Many alien empires heard the signal. The great councils, the trading guilds, the powerful species that ruled the spiral arms of the galaxy. They listened. And then they turned away. Some said it was a trap, a trick made by unknown enemies. Some said it was not their concern. Some said helping would cost too much. But deep inside one small blue planet, far from the center of power, the cry was not ignored. Earth listened. Humanity listened. The signal was first caught by a deep space listening post on the edge of the solar system. Operators stared at the strange code, hearts racing. The words were foreign but soon translated. What they read chilled them to the bone. This was no ordinary distress call. It was a scream from a world being consumed. Within hours, the message reached Earth's leaders. Presidents, generals, scientists, and admirals all gathered in hidden chambers. The room was dark, the air heavy. The message played again, over and over. Each time, the desperation seemed sharper, the fear more real. The leaders of Earth argued. Some said it was none of their business. Earth was still rebuilding from its own wars. Resources were limited. Soldiers were tired. Others said humanity could not ignore such a cry. They remembered their own history, their own times of despair when no one came to help. If humanity turned away now, what would that make them? The room fell silent. Finally, a voice spoke. It was the voice of an old admiral. His hair was white, his face carved with lines of battles long past. He said, "If we do not answer, then we are no better than the ones who ignored us when Earth bled. We know what it means to cry into the dark. And we will not leave them to die alone." His words struck deep. One by one, heads nodded. The decision was made. Earth would answer. Orders spread like wildfire. Across the oceans and skies, messages were sent to every hidden base, every shipyard, every training ground. The fleet would awaken. Humanity's deadliest warships, built in secret, born from steel and fire, prepared for war. They were not like the ships of the past. These were giants, armored like mountains, armed with weapons that could crack moons. They had names etched in legend: Leviathan, Vengeance, Dauntless, Ironclad. Each one carried thousands of men and women, ready to give everything. And yet, none knew what enemy awaited them. In homes and cities, families said goodbye. Mothers hugged their sons, fathers held their daughters, lovers whispered promises they knew might break. Children waved as towering soldiers marched into transports. The world watched as massive shadows lifted from oceans and deserts. The sky thundered with engines, and the stars shone brighter as the warships rose. People across Earth held their breath. They did not know if their soldiers would ever return. They only knew this: Earth would not stay silent while others screamed. Far away, alien empires observed. Some laughed at humanity's foolishness. They said Earth was young, reckless, and weak. They said the humans would be crushed like insects. Others felt a whisper of fear. They had seen humanity's wars before. They remembered the stubbornness of a species that refused to surrender, no matter the odds. They wondered what kind of answer humanity would give to the cry in the dark. As the fleet prepared to leave, the distress call played one last time. It filled the command decks, echoing in the halls of steel. The broken alien voice begged once more, its final words carrying through the static. They are coming. They are endless. Save us. The crew listened in silence. Their faces hardened. Their fists clenched. The fear in the message was clear. The enemy must be something beyond imagination, something that had already broken countless worlds. Yet no one aboard the ships spoke of retreat. The engines roared to life. Gates of light opened in space, tearing paths across the stars. Humanity's fleet, Earth's deadliest warships, launched into the unknown. They carried the hopes of their people, the weight of their history, and the fire of a promise. Humanity does not ignore cries for help. As the first ships vanished into the starlit void, a question burned in every mind. Who had sent the cry? What monster could drive an entire world to beg strangers for help? And when Earth's fleet arrived, would they be saviors, or the next victims? The galaxy did not know. Humanity did not know. But one truth had already been written. The cry had been heard. And Earth had answered. The message from the stars played again and again in the halls of Earth's high command. The words were broken, but the terror was clear. A world far away begged for help. They spoke of enemies without number, shadows that devoured everything in their path. The signal carried despair, but also a strange hope. It was as if the dying people believed Earth would be the one to answer. The chamber was dark, filled with the most powerful leaders of humanity. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, admirals, scientists, and intelligence chiefs all sat in silence. The air was heavy. Some eyes showed fear, some showed anger, and some burned with determination. On the great screen, the alien voice repeated its desperate call. The sound echoed like a ghost through the walls. At last, one man broke the silence. A general slammed his fist on the table. "We cannot risk this," he said. "Earth has only just rebuilt after decades of struggle. We cannot throw lives into a war that is not ours. This is madness." Others nodded. They spoke of Earth's fragile economy, the strain of arming fleets, the risk of losing their best soldiers in a fight far from home. "We survived because we were careful," said a prime minister. "Now you want to gamble everything on a voice from the dark? For all we know, this is a trap." The argument rose louder. Voices clashed, shouting across the chamber. Some demanded action, others demanded caution. But then, another voice cut through the storm. It was the admiral who had spoken in the last council, the old warrior whose words carried weight. His tone was calm but heavy with fire. "If this is a trap, then we will face it. If it is real, then those who called us need us now. We know what it is to be abandoned. We will not be the kind who turn away." The room fell quiet. The admiral's eyes swept across them all. "You speak of risk," he continued. "Yes, there is risk. But what of the greater danger? What if this enemy is real? What if it grows stronger with every world it devours? Do you think Earth will be safe when the galaxy around us burns? We must see what hunts in the dark before it finds us." His words struck like thunder. Some still resisted, but the seed of fear had been planted. They could not ignore the possibility that this unknown enemy might one day arrive at Earth's doorstep. A scientist rose, holding a tablet filled with analysis. She explained that the signal had traveled through strange regions of space. The energy signature was unique, not like anything they had seen before. The people who sent it were advanced enough to broadcast across the void, but their voices trembled with hopelessness. "Whoever they are," she said softly, "they are facing something beyond their strength." Her words lingered. Slowly, the council began to shift. One leader after another spoke, no longer with anger but with uncertainty. Some still said humanity should remain hidden, but others argued that this was a chance to prove their strength, a chance to show the galaxy that Earth was not weak. The debate stretched for hours. Shadows moved across faces lit by screens. Every possibility was weighed: diplomacy, retreat, limited aid, or full deployment. At last, the final decision came. The leader of the World Council, a man known for his calm, raised his hand. The chamber fell silent. The cry in the dark was heard, he said. If we ignore it, we will betray not only them, but ourselves. Humanity will answer. Earth will send its fleet. The words felt like a hammer on stone. The decision was final. Within minutes, orders raced across the planet. Deep beneath oceans, hidden shipyards roared to life. Massive hangars opened, revealing warships that had slept in silence. Engineers scrambled to arm weapons. Pilots were recalled from leave. Soldiers were summoned from every corner of Earth. The planet itself seemed to awaken as news spread in whispers. Families gathered around screens, listening to rumors of war. Some wept, others cheered. Some cursed the leaders for dragging them into another conflict, but many felt pride that Earth would not stay silent. In the barracks, soldiers checked their gear. They spoke little, but their eyes were sharp. Veterans knew the cost of war, but they also knew the price of ignoring evil. New recruits trembled, hiding their fear behind nervous laughter. Across the seas, aircraft carriers surfaced and transformed into space launch platforms. Submarines rose with hidden missile silos, ready to arm the great ships. From deserts, jungles, and mountain bases, gigantic war machines rolled toward launch bays. They were the deadliest creations of mankind, each ship holding the firepower of nations. The names of the flagships spread across the globe: Leviathan, Vengeance, Dauntless, Ironclad, and Sentinel. These were not just machines, they were legends brought to life. But in the quiet of the council chamber, some leaders sat with heavy hearts. They knew that many who left might never return. They had chosen a path of blood, and there was no turning back. Far away, the cry still echoed in the stars, weaker with each passing day. The alien voice begged one last time. They are coming. They are endless. The words haunted every listener. Who were they? What kind of force could drive an entire world to such fear? The council did not know, but the choice had been made. Humanity had cast its lot. The fleet would go. The old admiral stood once more as the chamber emptied. He whispered to himself, though others nearby heard. We go not because it is safe. We go because it is right. Let the stars know that when the galaxy turns away, Earth answers. And with that, the War Council ended. The path of humanity was set. Across the planet, warships prepared to leap into the unknown, carrying not just weapons and soldiers, but the weight of a promise carved into history. Humanity had chosen to rise, and soon, the galaxy would witness the answer of Earth. The decision had been made, and Earth moved with a power the galaxy had never seen before. From the frozen poles to the burning deserts, from deep oceans to the silent skies, humanity's hidden strength began to rise. The fleet that had once slept in silence was now awake, and the sound of its awakening shook the very air. Shipyards hidden beneath the seas opened like the jaws of titans. Water thundered as colossal warships, black as night and armed with weapons that glowed like fire, lifted themselves from the depths. Each vessel broke the waves with a roar, sending storms across the oceans as if the earth itself gave birth to monsters of steel. On their hulls were names written in bold letters: Leviathan, Dauntless, Vengeance, Ironclad. These names were not only marks of war but symbols of the spirit of humanity, a spirit that refused to die. In deserts where nothing lived but sand and silence, hidden gates opened, and massive ships rose into the skies on roaring engines. The ground cracked beneath their power, storms of dust covering entire regions as engines screamed into the heavens. From mountains carved hollow in secret, more ships emerged, sliding out of stone hangars like ancient beasts freed from cages. Each one carried weapons forged for one purpose: to meet the unknown and to destroy it. In the cities, people gathered on rooftops and streets, staring up at the shadows that now filled the skies. The warships climbed higher and higher, blotting out the sun. The fleet moved across the stars, cutting through the void with engines that burned like suns, their hulls shining in the darkness as symbols of Earth's power. And for days the warships traveled through the endless night. Soldiers drilled in silence, engineers checked weapons again and again, and captains stared into maps of unknown skies, waiting for the moment they would reach the source of the cry. And finally, After long nights and endless jumps through folded space, the fleet arrived at the edge of a system where no human eye had ever looked before, and at first, it seemed empty, a broken sun casting pale light over shattered rocks. But then the truth unfolded before them, for the planet that had called for help lay below, its surface burning, its cities torn apart, its oceans black with fire, its skies full of smoke, and the silence of death hung heavy. The cry they had heard was now almost gone, like the last whisper of a dying voice, and still the sensors picked up faint signals of life, desperate, scattered, hidden beneath ruins, clinging to survival like sparks in the ashes of a dead fire, and the captains gave orders, shields up, weapons ready. No one knew what had done this. No one knew what waited in the dark, and as the ships orbited, they saw movement on the ruined surface, small groups of survivors, weak and broken, waving with whatever strength they had left, and Earth's soldiers looked at them with pity and rage, because no world deserved to fall like this. No people deserved to be hunted to the edge of extinction, and soon, through translation systems, the survivors spoke, their voices trembling, their faces pale with fear, and one word came again and again through broken speech: devourers, devourers, devourers. And when asked what that meant, the survivors only shook and cried, their hands clutching at air, their eyes full of memories too dark to speak, and before answers could come, the sensors screamed, alarms cut through the silence, and commanders barked orders as shadows appeared at the edge of the system, massive shapes moving like predators, hundreds of them, their bodies not ships but something alive, twisted shapes of bone and metal, their surfaces crawling like they were made of flesh and machine together. And the fleet had seen enemies before, pirates, empires, machines of war, but nothing like this, for the devourers came with hunger, not for land, not for victory, but for life itself, and as they drew closer, their sheer size became clear, each one larger than a city, their maws glowing with strange light, their tendrils reaching across the void, and then the survivors whispered again, their voices breaking, "They eat worlds, they eat stars, they never stop," and the truth settled in the hearts of every human aboard. This was not just a battle, this was survival, and Earth's captains gave the order, battle stations, all guns live, shields at full, stand ready to face the unknown, and the fleet of Earth, the deadliest warships humanity had ever built, turned their guns toward the approaching darkness, their crews holding their breath, hearts pounding like drums, and across the stars, silence fell again, the silence before war, the silence before fire and blood, and every soul aboard knew this was the moment that would decide not only the fate of a dying world but perhaps the fate of Earth itself, for now, humanity stood face to face with the devourers, and the first contact had begun. The shadows closed in, and at last humanity saw the enemy with their own eyes. The devourers were not ships as men understood them but vast living nightmares, creatures of bone, metal, and black flesh fused into shapes that seemed wrong to even look at. Their surfaces writhed like living skin, their mouths opened wider than mountains, glowing with red light that looked like the fires of hell itself, and the fleets of Earth stood silent for only a moment before the first order came. Fire, and the void lit up as cannons roared, missiles screamed through the dark, and beams of white energy cut across the system, striking the devourers head-on. Explosions shook the black sky, burning pieces scattered like broken stars, and for a heartbeat it seemed humanity's weapons had found their mark. But then the truth revealed itself. The pieces that fell began to twitch and crawl, joining back together, forming again as if nothing had happened, and from the wounds of the devourers new limbs sprouted, alive, growing even as they were torn apart, and the human crews felt their stomachs twist because they realized their enemy did not die like normal foes. The devourers did not break. They consumed the very fire meant to destroy them, and then they struck back. Beams of sick green light shot from their maws, tearing through the void, slamming into Earth's shields, and entire ships shook under the weight of the assault. Alarms screamed, steel groaned, men and women held on as walls cracked and sparks rained down, and the first casualty came. A destroyer at the edge of formation took a direct hit, its shield shattered, its hull split open like paper, and in an instant, 3,000 souls vanished in fire. Silence filled the command decks for only a moment before rage followed. Captains barked orders, tighten the lines, cover the survivors, bring all weapons to bear, and the Leviathan, Earth's largest battleship, stepped forward, its guns roaring like thunder, salvo after salvo striking into the heart of the devourer swarm. This time the enemy slowed, pushed back by sheer force of fire, but more came, always more, shadows swarming from the edge of the system like an endless tide, and the survivors on the planet below cried through the comms, their voices shaking, telling the humans that this was how it always began. The first swarm was only the test, only the beginning, and once the feeding started it would not stop, and still the humans fought. Missile bays emptied, fighters launched into the dark, tiny craft darting around the colossal bodies of the devourers, striking at weak points, cutting at tendrils, sacrificing themselves to buy time, and the galaxy had never seen such defiance. For while other species had turned away or fled, Earth stood and met the storm head-on, refusing to yield. But even defiance has limits. Ammunition began to run low. Shield energy drained faster than it could recharge. The crews grew tired, sweat pouring down faces, hands shaking but refusing to stop, and still the devourers came, their endless hunger filling the void, and in that moment humanity understood the true terror of the enemy. This was not a foe that wanted victory. This was a force that wanted to erase, to consume, to strip the stars bare until nothing was left. And as the battle dragged on, the captains realized something. The devourers were not attacking blindly. They were testing, learning, adapting to human weapons. Every moment they grew faster, harder, stronger, and the thought chilled every heart, because if this was only the beginning, then what would the full swarm look like? What would happen when the true devourer horde came? And yet, even as dread filled their souls, no ship turned away, no captain gave the order to retreat, because Earth had come this far and Earth would not fall without a fight. And so the battle raged on, fire against darkness, steel against flesh, and across the galaxy, unseen by human eyes, other civilizations watched the transmissions, watched the small blue world's children stand against monsters that had consumed countless empires, and for the first time in ages, hope flickered, hope that perhaps the devourers could be resisted, hope that maybe the humans were not just another species waiting to die, but something more, something that could change the fate of stars. And as the battle reached its bloodiest point, the humans heard once again the whisper of the alien survivors, broken, but filled with awe. You fight them, you do not run. No one ever fought them before, and though death surrounded them, those words gave strength, and the warships of Earth roared back into the fire, knowing that this was not the end, but only the first of many battles in a war that would decide the future of the galaxy. The battle had turned into fire and chaos, and yet the humans refused to fall back. The devourers came in waves, their monstrous bodies blotting out the stars, their tendrils reaching across the void like claws hunting for prey. But the warships of Earth stood in formation, their steel hulls shining even as they burned, their guns spitting fire with every second, and the captains knew they were outnumbered. They knew every moment could be their last. But not one of them gave the order to retreat. Instead they tightened the line, they brought their ships closer, shields overlapping, weapons firing in unison, and the void itself thundered with a roar of humanity's defiance. The Leviathan led the charge, its colossal guns hammering into the largest of the devourers, tearing chunks of burning flesh from its body, and though the beast screamed in a voice that shook the void, it did not stop. Instead it hurled itself forward, slamming against the Leviathan's shields with power that cracked metal and shattered glass. Yet the crew held, their voices steady, their hands working as if the world itself depended on them, and in truth it did. For if Earth's fleet fell here, then the galaxy would know that no one could stand against the swarm. The smallest ships darted in and out of the enemy lines, frigates and destroyers sacrificing themselves to protect the carriers. Fighters swarmed like hornets, striking at joints, tearing at exposed flesh, and though each one burned bright before vanishing in explosions, their bravery bought precious moments for the larger ships to reload and fire again, and through it all the survivors on the broken planet below watched with wide eyes, for they had seen their own defenders crushed in days, they had seen their fleets torn apart without mercy. Yet these humans, these strangers from another world, did not run. They fought with a fury that seemed almost madness, and whispers spread among the survivors. Whispers that maybe the devourers were not invincible, maybe there was hope, and those whispers gave the soldiers of Earth strength, for the comms carried them to the bridge, where weary men and women listened and found fire in their hearts once more. Even as alarms screamed and hulls cracked, they fought on. One ship, the Dauntless, took hit after hit until its shields were gone, its engines crippled, and instead of retreating its captain made the final choice. He rammed the ship straight into the largest of the beasts, detonating its reactor in a blaze so bright it lit the planet below like a fall sunrise, and when the light faded the beast was gone, torn apart, and though the Dauntless was lost, every crew member aboard knew they had carved victory out of sacrifice. Cheers rose through the fleet, short-lived but powerful, because even in despair humanity had proven it could strike back. Yet the cost was heavy, ammunition stores ran thin. Fuel dropped dangerously low. Entire squadrons of fighters were gone. Shields across the fleet flickered like dying flames, and still the devourers pressed forward, their endless tide showing no sign of breaking, and the admirals knew the truth. They could not hold forever, but they could hold long enough to show the galaxy that humanity would not bow, long enough to give the survivors a chance to live, long enough to prove that when the darkness came, Earth stood tall, and so the order went out, hold the line, no matter the cost, and every crew member, every soldier, every pilot accepted it without fear, their faces grim but proud, because they knew they were no longer fighting only for themselves, they were fighting for every voice that had ever cried into the dark, for every world that had been silenced by the swarm, for Earth, and for the hope that maybe their stand would echo across the stars. And as the devourers swarmed again, as the sky burned and metal screamed, humanity's warships tightened their formation and unleashed everything they had left, and though the outcome was uncertain, though death loomed close, one truth had already been written in fire. The humans would not retreat, they would not surrender, and they would fight until the last ship fell, and that defiance, that unyielding will, shook the stars themselves. The battle raged without end, the devourers pressing harder with every wave, their monstrous bodies blotting out the stars, their endless hunger tearing into shields and armor, and still humanity fought, refusing to yield. But deep inside the command decks, scientists and officers worked with desperate speed, scanning every attack, every movement, every fragment of the enemy that floated in the void, searching for something, anything, that could give them a chance. And at last, after hours of struggle, a breakthrough came. One scientist, her voice shaking with exhaustion, shouted across the bridge that the devourers were not unkillable. Their bodies healed because they drew energy from the void itself, from the radiation of stars, feeding endlessly on light and power. But when their flesh was struck with concentrated bursts of high-frequency energy, their healing slowed, their wounds stayed open longer, and the crews listened as hope flickered in their hearts. The enemy could bleed. The enemy could die, but the cost of exploiting this weakness was great. It required enormous energy, more than any one ship could carry, and so the admiral of the Leviathan spoke the words that would shape history. Then we make a weapon out of ourselves, we lure them in and burn them with the fire of a star. His plan was madness, and yet it was the only path left. The engineers explained that if the Leviathan overloaded its main reactor and focused the energy through its massive cannon arrays, it could unleash a beam strong enough to burn through even the largest devourer, but the price would be the ship itself. The crew fell silent. They knew what that meant. The Leviathan would become a torch, burning bright but dying in the process, and still the admiral stood tall, his eyes calm, his voice steady as he said, "If one ship must fall so the rest may live, then let it be mine." And though the officers protested, though tears filled the eyes of young soldiers who did not want to die, the admiral silenced them with a single command. "We are humanity's shield, and if we must break to protect our people, then we will break with honor." And so preparations began, the Leviathan's crew working with grim determination, rerouting power, charging weapons to levels never meant to be reached, and across the fleet the message spread: the Leviathan would make the stand. It would become the blade that cut into the heart of the swarm, and the other ships would guard it with their lives. The soldiers tightened their grips on weapons, the pilots swore oaths to fly until their last breath, and even the survivors on the broken planet below watched with tears and awe, whispering to each other that these humans were not like the others. They did not run, they did not abandon, they would fight to the last. The devourers closed in again, sensing the energy building within the Leviathan, their monstrous bodies surrounding the fleet like a tide of shadows. But this time humanity did not falter. This time the fleet opened fire with renewed fury, holding the enemy back inch by inch, their hulls cracking, their shields failing, but their spirits burning brighter than ever. And inside the Leviathan the admiral stood on the bridge, watching the enemy swarm across the stars, his hand resting on the command console, his voice low but firm as he said, "If this is our end, then let it be one the galaxy never forgets." The countdown began, energy levels rising, the core glowing brighter and brighter until the whole ship trembled like a beast ready to roar, and the devourers sensed the danger, hurling themselves forward with a frenzy that shook the void, dozens of them smashing into the shields, tearing at the hull. But the fleet closed ranks, smaller ships throwing themselves in front of the Leviathan, sacrificing their lives to give it the time it needed, and fire lit the dark as one after another fell. But still the countdown ticked lower, and the admiral gave his final command, "Fire," and the Leviathan roared, its main cannon unleashing a beam of pure light, a concentrated stream of energy brighter than any sun. It tore through the darkness like the blade of a god, cutting straight into the largest of the devourers. The creature screamed, its body splitting apart, its endless healing halted, and for the first time the swarm recoiled, pieces of their monstrous bodies burning, their tide broken, and the fleet erupted in cheers even as tears ran down faces, because the Leviathan's light was also its end, its reactor collapsing, fire spreading through its hull, and the admiral stood tall until the very last moment, whispering to his crew, "Remember, humanity fights, humanity endures." And then the Leviathan exploded, a sun born and dead in a single instant, the shockwave tearing across the system, ripping apart countless devourers, pushing the swarm back into the void, and when the fire cleared, silence fell. The survivors stared at the wreckage where the Leviathan had once stood, and grief filled every heart, but alongside the grief came something else, hope, for the devourers had been hurt, they had been beaten back, and the galaxy now knew they were not unstoppable, and as the surviving ships gathered, battered but unbroken, one truth echoed through the stars: humanity had found the turning point, and the war was far from over, but for the first time it could be won. The wreckage of the Leviathan still burned in the void, its shattered hull drifting like fragments of a fallen star, but its sacrifice had lit a fire in the hearts of every human and every survivor who had witnessed it. The devourers had been wounded, their endless tide pushed back, and though the loss of the great ship weighed heavy, the hope it gave was brighter than grief. Across the fleet captains raised their voices, swearing they would carry on the fight, and engineers scrambled to copy the Leviathan's final act, modifying weapons, altering reactors, and preparing new ways to channel energy into beams that could burn the swarm, and word spread beyond the battlefield, carried by desperate transmissions and hidden channels. Other worlds that had thought the swarm unstoppable now heard the truth, that the humans of Earth had stood against the devourers and struck them down, and that truth was like fire spreading across dry fields, igniting courage where there had only been fear. Small resistance cells on distant planets rose again, broken fleets began to regroup, and the galaxy, for the first time in centuries, dared to believe that the devourers could be defeated. But the swarm did not retreat quietly. Wounded and enraged, they poured forward in even greater numbers, their endless bodies blotting out whole systems, and the humans knew this battle was only beginning, yet their spirits did not falter. Instead they spread their fleet wider, pushing into contested space, striking at the monsters before they could gather strength again. Earth's warships became a hammer, slamming again and again into the swarm, their smaller ships carrying modified cannons, their carriers launching endless waves of fighters armed with high-frequency payloads. And though each strike cost lives, each battle ended with the devourers burning, their massive corpses drifting through the void, proof that the tide had shifted. On one broken colony world a single human ship landed amid ruins, its soldiers stepping out not to evacuate but to fight alongside the survivors, and when the people saw the symbol of Earth on their armor, they cried with relief, whispering that the nightmare could finally be resisted. One soldier placed his hand on the rubble and swore to them, "We are not here to take you, we are here to stand with you," and those words spread like a second fire, uniting broken worlds under a single banner, the banner of defiance. The devourers struck back with fury, targeting Earth's fleet with monstrous beasts larger than cities, their tendrils whipping across space, their jaws tearing apart asteroids like dust, and for a moment fear returned. But then the fleet responded with fire, unleashing everything they had, coordinated strikes that turned the void into storms of light, frigates darting in and out like wolves, destroyers hammering with precision, and battleships standing like walls, their cannons tearing massive wounds into the swarm, and in the midst of it, all the survivors of the Leviathan's sister ships carried the memory of its sacrifice, fighting harder, shouting battle cries that reached across comms, for the Leviathan, for Earth, for the galaxy, and their voices gave strength to all who heard them. The swarm's endless number still came, but now each push was answered with fury, each wave broken with steel and fire, and the humans adapted quickly, learning with every fight, adjusting tactics, striking at weak points, and using captured fragments of devourer flesh to develop weapons sharper and stronger than ever. Scientists worked day and night aboard carriers, creating new ammunition and new shields that could resist the void-draining touch of the swarm, and though exhaustion weighed heavy, no one stopped, because they all knew what waited if they failed: entire worlds consumed, entire species erased. And so they pushed on, battle after battle, fire after fire, until the swarm began to change, their movements slower, their attacks less certain, as if for the first time they felt fear. and that fear was the greatest victory of all. For if the Devourers could fear, they could fall. The turning point had become ablaze, and now the war was no longer only survival, it was retribution. The humans of Earth had carried their fire across the stars, and the galaxy was rising with them, and though the war was far from over, though death still loomed at every shadow, one truth could no longer be denied: humanity had taken the fight to the monsters, and the swarm would never again see the galaxy as theirs to consume. For Earth had answered the cry in the dark, and now its voice echoed like thunder, promising that the fire would not end until the last devourer was ash. The galaxy trembled as the final storm gathered. The Devourers were weakened but not broken, their endless hunger still spreading like a shadow across countless systems. Yet for the first time in living memory they faced an enemy that did not run. Humanity's fire had spread, their courage had pulled shattered fleets and broken survivors together, and now across the stars ships of many worlds formed into a single armada, their banners different but their purpose one: to strike the swarm in its heart and end the nightmare. Earth's warships led the charge, scarred and battered from endless battles but unyielding, their hulls patched, their guns reloaded, their crews hardened by fire and sacrifice. And when the order came to gather at the edge of the swarm's core, no one hesitated. Millions of lives carried in steel and fire, ready to give everything for the chance to see dawn break again. The command channels crackled with voices of every race that had survived the swarm's terror, and in each voice there was steel, in each word the echo of Earth's defiance. The admiral of the human fleet stood on his bridge, his eyes fixed on the swirling mass of the swarm's central hive, a beast larger than moons, a writhing core of tendrils and flesh that fed the swarm with endless power. And he knew that if it fell the Devourers would weaken, if it burned the swarm would finally be broken, but the price would be beyond measure, because the hive was guarded by the largest army ever seen. Creatures so massive their shadows blotted out entire fleets, their tendrils armed with energy that tore through shields like paper, their roars shaking the very void. And yet the order was given: advance. The armada surged forward, human warships at the front, alien cruisers and carriers spreading on the flanks, fighters pouring out like swarms of sparks, and the void lit with fire. The Devourers came in waves, smashing into the armada with monstrous fury. Ships exploded, whole squadrons vanished in seconds, but the fleet pressed on, firing with everything they had, every shot aimed not to survive but to carve a path to the hive. Frigates darted ahead, sacrificing themselves to drag the monsters away. Battleships fired beams that split the dark. Carriers unleashed fighters armed with new weapons built from the Leviathan's sacrifice, and though thousands fell the armada kept pushing, closer and closer to the hive. And in the middle of the chaos the humans saw the truth: the hive itself was feeding, drawing energy from every star in the system, its tendrils reaching out like veins drinking light, and the scientists aboard the carriers screamed into the comms. If the hive finished its feeding it would become unstoppable. It had to be destroyed now, no matter the cost. The admiral clenched his fist and gave the order: all ships, focus fire on the core, and the fleet obeyed. Beams and torpedoes lanced into the massive body of the hive, tearing wounds into its flesh, making it scream a sound so loud it echoed through every hull. But still it endured, still it healed, until the humans remembered what had been learned in fire. The hive could not heal against high-frequency energy, the same weakness the Leviathan had revealed, and so the armada shifted, powering their modified weapons, overloading reactors, and hurling waves of light into the monster. Its body burned, its tendrils twisted, its endless roar turned from hunger to pain, and hope rose in the hearts of every soldier, every survivor. The monster could fall, but the swarm sensed their danger, and they hurled everything they had to stop the fleet. Titans larger than cities smashing into battleships, monstrous beasts tearing entire cruisers in half. The sky burned brighter than any sun, fire consuming thousands, but no one turned back. One by one captains rammed their ships into the monsters, detonating in blinding flashes that tore open holes in the swarm, each sacrifice cutting a path closer to the hive. And through it all the admiral's voice carried, steady and fierce: humanity does not bow, humanity does not break, today we burn the shadow. His words filled every channel, spreading across the galaxy, giving courage to the dying and strength to the living. And with one final push the armada reached the hive, its core exposed, its massive body thrashing in pain, and the order came: all ships, unleash everything. And the void itself seemed to crack as the armada poured every last shot, every last missile, every last drop of energy into the monster. The hive screamed one final time, its body collapsing, its tendrils curling and burning, until at last it tore apart in a storm of fire. The explosion rippled across the system, tearing through the swarm, burning their bodies, silencing their roars, and when the light faded the stars were quiet, the swarm was gone, broken at last. The price had been unthinkable, thousands of ships gone, millions of lives lost, but the nightmare was ended, and as the survivors floated in silence, their ships scarred and broken but alive, one truth echoed through the void: humanity had stood at the front of the storm, had carried the fire across the stars, and with their allies they had ended the swarm. The cry that had once been a plea for help had become a roar of victory, and the galaxy would never forget the day Earth's warships answered.